A lot of the conversations about Fatima have to do with these so-called three secrets. Well, there really weren't three secrets. During the third apparition on July 13, 1917, Mary showed the children two visions. The first was a vision of hell. This is what is sometimes referred to as the first secret.
In 1960, the world waited. The faithful held their breath, and the Vatican broke its promise. There was no announcement, no revelation, just a silence that echoed like a locked door in the heart of the church. The third secret of Fatima, written by a cloistered nun who had seen visions that shook the world, remained sealed. What was hidden inside that envelope? Why did the Vatican refuse to reveal the message that was meant for all of humanity? For decades, the silence grew heavier, the rumors grew louder, and the world changed in ways that seemed to fulfill every shadowy warning. Tonight, the truth can no longer be buried. This is the secret the world was never meant to see, and it changes everything. Silence, smoke, and the secret buried by Rome. The year was 1960, but it could have been any year when heaven and earth seemed poised on the edge of revelation. For decades, the faithful had lived with the promise of a secret, one written by a cloistered nun who, as a child, had seen the very heart of the world split open by a vision. The Vatican had promised to reveal this secret, the third and final message from Fatima, no later than 1960. Priests whispered about it from pulpits. Newspapers speculated. Ordinary believers set their clocks to the slow tick of anticipation. The first two secrets, after all, had already changed the world, predicting wars and the spread of new errors from Russia. But the third was something different, something darker, something that even the church seemed afraid to speak aloud. As the year arrived, the world watched Rome with a strange mix of hope and fear. The church had always been a fortress, a keeper of mysteries, a place where secrets could rest safe behind stone walls and heavy doors. But this secret was not meant for silence. It had been entrusted to Sister Lucia by a lady clothed in light, a message inscribed in her own hand, sealed, and sent to Rome with a single command: reveal it to the world. When 1960 came, however, the Vatican did not answer. There was no announcement, no solemn proclamation, no special ceremony or reading. Instead, a profound and chilling silence fell over the church. The envelope remained sealed. The faithful stood stunned, and the promise was broken. The silence itself became a kind of message, one that spread far beyond the marble halls and velvet curtains of the Holy See. It drifted through the streets, found its way into chapels and kitchens, and settled deep into the hearts of those who had waited for truth. Sister Lucia, the last living visionary of Fatima, had always been the church's most obedient daughter. She was the one who wrote the secrets down, the one who lived her days behind the cloister's walls, the one who was supposed to have her voice protected by the hierarchy. But after 1960, her voice was muffled, if not entirely silenced. Her words were filtered, her letters censored, her interviews rare and tightly controlled. She would never again speak freely about Fatima. What had once been an open line between heaven and earth was now a cold institutional wall. The Vatican's official explanation was brief and oddly dismissive. The secret did not concern our time. That phrase settled like dust, but it did not erase the questions. Why break the explicit command of the Blessed Virgin? Why hold back a message meant for all humanity? Why risk defying not just the faithful, but heaven itself? Rumors swirled in the absence of answers. Some claimed the envelope had been opened and then quietly resealed, its contents too dangerous, too terrifying, or too destabilizing to be made public. Others believed the secret had been buried because it contained prophecies that the church could not bear to face, warnings of internal betrayal and a spiritual rot that would start not with the laity but with the shepherds themselves. It was said the real warning spoke not of Russia but of Rome, not of bombs but of apostasy, not of the world but of the very altars of the church. The silence was not just procedural, it felt like defiance, a defiance not just of public curiosity but of a divine command. It felt like the beginning of a new era of secrets and shadows. The years that followed were marked by change, both inside and outside the church. The world moved forward with new wars, revolutions, and upheavals, and the church seemed to drift along with it. The The spirit of the age entered the sanctuary. Priests began speaking more about social justice than the gospel. Tradition was labeled rigidity, and comfort slowly replaced fire in the pulpit. Doctrinal clarity faded into diplomatic ambiguity. Many in the pews did not notice. Others stayed silent, fearing what might happen if they questioned the new order. But the faithful who remembered Fatima felt a chill. They wondered if the silence was not just bureaucratic delay, but the result of something deeper, something that was already unraveling from within. Throughout these years, Sister Lucia continued to write letters, her voice increasingly measured, her warnings increasingly grave. She spoke of diabolical disorientation, a spiritual inversion in which evil would parade as virtue, where doctrine would be blurred, and where even the good would be led astray. She insisted the greatest danger would not come from persecution or war, but from within the very heart of the Church. She wrote of a coming time when Satan's final assault would be aimed not at the laity, but at the altars, not at the world, but at the shepherds. The Church, she warned, would face a trial of confusion so profound that only prayer, penance and devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary would be enough to withstand it. Despite the warnings, official statements from Rome were sparse, and the Vatican's grip on information only grew tighter. Whenever Lucia spoke publicly, her words were subject to approval, and over time, her testimony was reduced to vague generalities. Her last freely given interview, in 1957, contained words that would haunt generations. Do not wait for Rome to call the world to penance. Do not wait for bishops, priests, or governments. This is the hour for every soul to begin their own spiritual reform. These were not words of piety. They were words of warning, words that suggested time was short, that the world was drifting away not just from God, but from the very structure built to lead it back. Lucia described souls consecrated to God falling in great numbers, religious leaders dragging others down, and a spiritual blindness spreading through the hierarchy. It was a vision of not just decline, but betrayal. Rome responded with silence, then with discredit. Shortly after that interview, Father Fuentes, who had published Lucia's words with episcopal approval, was removed from his position. The Diocese of Coimbra issued an official statement declaring the interview false, claiming Lucia had said nothing of the kind. Overnight, the last free voice of Fatima was silenced, and Sister Lucia herself was placed under stricter observation. Yet her letters, carefully written, quietly distributed, continued to warn of an inner rot, a battle raging over the soul of the Church, a great confusion in doctrine, a cowardice in preaching, and a leadership that preferred nostalgia to obedience. The more the Vatican insisted that Fatima was about the past, the more the world seemed to live out its prophecies. Scandal followed scandal. Doctrinal confusion became the rule rather than the exception. The faithful grew weary. The flock scattered. The shepherds seemed more preoccupied with public relations than penance. The envelope sat in a Vatican drawer, untouched, its contents known to only a select few. When the year 2000 arrived, the Vatican finally released what it claimed was the third secret, a vision of a bishop in white, walking through a ruined city, corpses everywhere, martyrs falling, arrows and bullets in the air, and the Pope himself struck down. Theologians rushed to declare it a metaphor, a vision already fulfilled, perhaps a reference to the assassination attempt on John Paul II. But to many, the vision was a riddle, not a message. There were no words from Our Lady, no clear warning. Just symbols, just silence where there should have been speech. Even respected churchmen questioned the official version. Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, acknowledged that the text was authentic, but hinted there may be more, something that spoke not only of suffering and violence, but of the very future of the Church. Other Fatima scholars were more direct. What was released was real but not complete. Lucia, after all, had always been clear and direct in her warnings. Fatima was not a puzzle or a poem. It was a message, a call to arms. Where was the clarity? Where was the urgency? Where were the words that so many had heard whispered for decades? Words about apostasy, loss of faith, confusion at the highest levels, and the betrayal of the flock from within? For every question answered by the Vatican's release, a dozen more were born. Why the 40-year delay? Why the secrecy? Why was Lucia, the one person who could clarify, suddenly unreachable? Why were earlier interviews denied and suppressed? Why were faithful bishops and priests who defended the fullness of the message removed or sidelined? Who gave the Church permission to censor a message entrusted by heaven to all of humanity? And if the real third secret warned of a crisis not from without but from within, a rot at the heart of the Church, a diabolical confusion, a time when truth would be labelled cruelty and error would be praised as mercy, then why was it hidden? The decades since 1960 have seen confusion, scandal, betrayal, division, doctrinal ambiguity, and an erosion of clarity that has left the faithful in a wilderness of spiritual uncertainty. Was it just a matter of history playing out? Or was it the direct result of a warning ignored, a message buried, a secret kept by men who thought they knew better than heaven? In the silence of that Vatican drawer, in the suppressed interviews and the forbidden letters, in the growing confusion and scandal, was the secret truly too terrible to reveal? Or was it simply too true to risk? And what happens now that the storm Sister Lucia saw has started to break upon the world? Not in the distant future, but in the present moment, right here, right now. Whispers behind the wall. After 1960, silence did not signal the end of Fatima's mystery. Instead, it marked the beginning of an uncomfortable tension that crept through every layer of Catholic life. The third secret was more than a lost prophecy. It became a wound that never healed. For decades, the Vatican kept Sister Lucia's handwritten warning locked in a drawer, undisturbed and unaddressed, while the world outside changed in ways that seemed to echo what she had tried to say. Generations of Catholics felt the impact, even if they could not name it directly. It was as though the voice of heaven had been muffled, and the faithful were left to drift in a spiritual fog. Sister Lucia did not vanish quietly. Even behind convent walls, she left a trail that could not be ignored. Her letters, still allowed for a time, hinted at the burden she carried. In 1957, just before the Church would draw the veil over Fatima's last message, she met with Father Fuentes and spoke with a gravity that shook him to his core. Lucia was never melodramatic. Her warnings were precise, her sorrow unmistakable. The Virgin Mary, she said, was deeply saddened, not only because sinners refused to listen, but because even the faithful were ignoring her words. Lucia urged urgency. Do not wait for Rome. Do not wait for bishops or governments. Each soul, she insisted, was called to begin its own reform now, before it was too late. What troubled those who heard her was that Lucia's warnings were not about distant catastrophes or foreign wars. She was describing a crisis that had already begun within the Church itself. She spoke of priests and religious falling away in numbers too great to ignore. She warned that the devil's final battle would not be fought in city streets or government halls, but inside the Church, targeting those at the altar, those entrusted with the flock. This was not wild speculation or the nervous fears of an aging nun. These were the steady words of a woman who knew too much, that what was coming could not be stopped by polite silence or official caution. Father Fuentes published her words, and the effect was immediate. The faithful around the world felt the gravity of what she was saying. It was not about storms on the horizon. It was about a storm already gathering at the heart of the Church. But Rome did not approve. The Diocese of Coimbra quickly issued a statement denying the interview's accuracy, insisting Lucia's words had been twisted or misunderstood. Father Fuentes was removed from his position, and Lucia's access to the world became even more restricted. Her letters were reviewed, her speech limited, her testimony placed under lock and key. That swift and harsh reaction only deepened suspicion. What was it about Lucia's testimony that frightened the hierarchy so much? Why would Church authorities move so quickly to suppress the words of a cloistered nun? The answer seemed to lie in the heart of her warning, a vision of spiritual blindness, of internal rot, of a confusion so deep it would one day leave the Church almost unrecognizable. Lucia described a church where doctrine grew vague, where ancient traditions were dismissed as outmoded, where priests lost the courage to preach hard truths. She drew a pattern, not with accusations, but with clarity that made denial almost impossible. As the decades moved on, her pattern began to appear in reality. Scandals became commonplace. Confusion settled at the highest levels. The pulpit, once the place for prophetic fire, turned timid, wary of giving offense. Devotions faded. Sacramental life withered. What was once a beacon became, for many, just another institution slowly accommodating the demands of the age. Lucia's warnings, however, could not be erased. Even after she was officially silenced, her letters and testimonies leaked through the cracks. She kept returning to a phrase that haunted every serious reader: diabolical disorientation. It was not simply confusion, but a reversal, a spiritual blindness so profound that the church would begin to trade clarity for comfort, doctrine for diplomacy, even good for evil and evil for good. Lucia warned that shepherds themselves would betray their calling, that leaders would abandon the flock, and that ordinary Catholics would have to seek the truth through personal prayer, devotion, and a return to the old weapons of faith. The third secret thus became something living, not just a line in church history, but an ongoing sign that something vital had been left unsaid. Every time the Vatican shifted its teaching, every time new scandals rocked the faithful, every ambiguous message from Rome seemed to confirm what Lucia had been forbidden to explain. The secrecy itself grew more troubling. Was the hierarchy trying to shield the faithful from fear, or themselves from the truth? When the Vatican finally released what it called the full third secret in 2000, a vision of a bishop in white walking through ruins, it offered little comfort. There was no direct mention of internal betrayal, of apostasy, of doctrinal collapse. Even Cardinal Ratzinger would later suggest there was more, that not everything had been revealed. Rumors grew louder, whispers of extra pages, hidden instructions, secret archives that the world had never seen. Among the faithful, the hunger for truth only grew. Pilgrims went to Fatima, not just for miracles, but to pray for clarity. Priests and lay people alike remembered Lucia's last plea, that penance and prayer were the final weapons of the faithful in a time when the Church itself might become unrecognizable. Today, the secret is not only a Vatican file, it lives in every Catholic heart that senses something has changed. The fog of diabolical disorientation lingers. The shepherds still debate. The hierarchy reassures, but the faithful remember the question that has haunted the Church since that silent year. What if the real secret of Fatima is about now? And if the greatest warning from heaven is unfolding in our time, will we finally listen? How heaven's warning became today's reality. Decades slipped by, but the mystery of Fatima's third secret grew only heavier. It was a storm cloud that lingered over the church, raising the question, what did Sister Lucia see that the Vatican refused to let into daylight? The world moved on from 191. Empires fell, wars came and went. Even the church itself changed so gradually that most barely noticed the ground shifting beneath them. Yet, through every crisis, Rome's silence about the final secret never really ended. Each new scandal, each new wave of confusion, only made more people wonder if the storm Sister Lucia warned about was no longer a distant threat, but something happening in real time. When the Vatican finally acted in 2000, the reveal was anticlimactic. Officials read out a vision, a bishop in white crossing a ruined city, martyrs falling, the Pope himself struck down at the foot of a cross. The faithful searched for clarity, but many sensed the truth was still locked away. Rome explained that the vision predicted past persecutions, especially the attempt on John Paul II, and that the prophecy had been fulfilled. But for those who had followed Fatima from the beginning, the explanation felt incomplete. Why had the Blessed Virgin insisted this secret be revealed in 1960, only for it to become a riddle and a symbol left open to interpretation decades later? Why all the secrecy, the censored interviews, and the missing letters? Even within the hierarchy, doubts spread. Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, hinted at more, something yet unrevealed, a danger not only of persecution, but of a crisis of faith itself. Other Vatican insiders whispered that what the world saw in 2000 was only part of the story, that Lucia's own words had been withheld. Suspicion deepened as scandals shook the church. Abuse, corruption, divisions among bishops. Ancient devotions were pushed aside, doctrine became ambiguous, and the confidence of generations began to slip away. For many Catholics, it felt like waking up in a world where all the landmarks had shifted. Parishes emptied, Vocations plummeted, confessionals went unused. What was once a rock now seemed adrift. Priests and lay people alike wondered whether the storm Lucia foresaw was no longer an apocalyptic warning, but the spiritual confusion unfolding right before their eyes. Suddenly, Lucia's warnings, dismissed for years as exaggeration, felt frighteningly current. She had spoken of a final battle within the church, a diabolical disorientation where evil paraded as good, confusion spread from altars to pews, and shepherds lost the courage to lead. The evidence was everywhere for anyone willing to look. Some former insiders said the real secret was not about wars or martyrdom, but about betrayal at the highest levels, a hollowing out from within. Paul VI himself once warned, "From some fissure, the smoke of Satan has entered the temple of God." Many saw his words unfolding in the endless division, in the eerie silence from Rome, in the refusal to confront what was truly at stake. The most disturbing reality about the third secret may be what has happened since it was hidden. Each year of silence, each suppressed testimony, each closed archive only deepened the crisis. The world is not waiting for a warning. The warning is now. Heaven's message is not locked in a Vatican drawer. It is being lived by a church abandoned by many leaders and a people left unsure whom to trust. Prophecy is meant to prepare, not paralyze. But what happens when preparation is blocked, when the message is lost, when those who see the danger are the very ones silenced? If the real prophecy was about a betrayal from within, who will finally speak the truth, and who will have the faith to endure what comes next? The final warning, when secrets refuse to die. Time always exposes what men try to bury. As the years pressed forward, the Church's silence about Fatima's third secret became more than an unanswered question. It became the very proof that something sacred had been withheld. In Rome, new popes ascended the throne of Peter and offered hope to the weary, but the shadow of the secret never vanished. Even as the Vatican tried to close the book on Fatima by releasing the vision of the Bishop in White, the world was already living in the aftermath of what had not been spoken aloud. By the dawn of the new millennium, believers no longer waited for revelations from Rome. They watched as prophecy seemed to unfold, not with thunder but with a slow, relentless erosion of clarity. Each year brought new scandals. Each decade revealed deeper divisions. And each day the Church lost a little more of its confidence. Priests left their vocations. Bishops argued in public. The catechism was revised. The sacraments abandoned. And the sound of prayer faded into background noise. What once would have been unthinkable became routine. And through it all, the silence around Fatima's last message remained thick and unbroken. Yet secrets are not defeated by denial. The world's thirst for truth only grew. Some travelled to Fatima and stood before the old statue, desperate for a sign. Others dug through the Vatican archives, searching for a letter, a note, a forgotten testimony that would unlock the mystery. Still more simply returned to the only guidance that was ever truly given. Pray, do penance, stay faithful. Sister Lucia's letters and interviews, carefully preserved by a handful of friends, circulated quietly. The words she wrote before being silenced became a lifeline for those who sensed the hour was late. She warned of a time when confusion would be so thick that even the elect would wonder whom to follow. She spoke of a moment when the greatest danger would come not from the world's enemies, but from the Church's own guardians. She described, in gentle but unyielding terms, a battle for the soul of the Church so intense that only those who clung to the Rosary and the Immaculate Heart of Mary would be able to endure it. There is a reason her words refuse to die. They are not just predictions, but a map for survival. The scandal and division that now fill the headlines did not arrive unannounced. They were seen, they were warned, and then they were ignored. Lucia's voice was not that of a rebel. She was a model of obedience, but her obedience was first to heaven. She wrote what she was told. She delivered the message on time. The decision to hide it belonged to others, and in that decision, history was rewritten. The Church, which had always been the world's anchor, lost its footing, not through external attack, but through an internal surrender. Yet, even this is not the end of the story. The power of prophecy is not that it gives us a script, but that it gives us a choice. As the third secret lingered in the dark, believers around the world began to see themselves not as bystanders, but as participants in a battle that stretched from the altars to the smallest chapel, from Rome to the remotest village. Each act of faith, each prayer, each refusal to accept lies as truth became a blow against the confusion that threatened to engulf the world. What heaven had asked for was not grand gestures, but small daily acts of courage. The courage to believe, the courage to speak, the courage to trust that God has not abandoned his people even when leaders fail. In recent years, new rumors have emerged, whispers that another pope, one unafraid to speak plainly, has begun to open the old files again. There are stories of secret meetings, of letters passed quietly among the hierarchy, of a renewed effort to recover what was lost. Whether these stories are true or not hardly matters, because the real power of Fatima has never resided in envelopes or archives. It lives in every soul that chooses the truth over convenience, prayer over despair, and hope over cynicism. The secret endures because the need for it has never gone away. The world today stands at a crossroads. The faithful are scattered and divided. The institutions that once seemed unshakable have been exposed as fragile. The same darkness Lucia saw so long ago now walks openly through the streets, and even, at times, through the sanctuary. Yet, heaven does not abandon its children. The Blessed Virgin's final message, whatever words were hidden or revealed, remains the same. Return to God, repent, hold fast to faith, and do not be afraid. The real secret was never a prediction of doom, but a promise that grace will not fail those who refuse to let go of the light. The story of Fatima is not finished. It is still being written in every act of courage, every confession made, every rosary whispered in the dark. The Church, wounded but alive, still carries within her the power to heal and to save. The message that the Vatican tried to bury has taken root in the hearts of those who refuse to settle for silence. And as long as there are people who are willing to seek the truth, who hunger for the real word of God, the secret will not die. So perhaps this is the final twist. What men locked away, heaven has already set free. The warning remains, the call is not revoked, and the time for choosing is now. If you have felt the confusion, the sadness, the longing for a church that stands firm, know you are not alone. You are part of the story. The secret is yours now. What you do with it will shape not only your future, but the future of the world. If you have watched this far, you are already searching for the truth. Let that search continue. Share what you have found. Pray as if the battle has already begun, because it has. Stay faithful, even when others are not. Hold on to hope, even when darkness grows. The secret of Fatima was never meant to be a story about the past. It is a summons to courage in the present. The silence is over. The choice is yours. Every prayer counts, every voice matters, and even the smallest act of faith can light up a world lost in confusion. Don't underestimate your role in this story. If you want more stories the world tries to hide, subscribe now and share your thoughts in the comments below. The real secret is that heaven still speaks, and maybe, just maybe, the final word is still to come.